Yep. Good morning. I declare open this public briefing for the Committee's inquiry into the Public-Private Partnership, Transparency and Accountability Bill 2024. My name is Chris Whiting. I'm the member for Bancroft and Chair of the Committee. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. We are very fortunate to live in a country with two of the oldest continuing cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples whose lands, winds and waters we all share. With me today are Mr Jim McDonald, Member for Lockyer, Deputy Chair, Don Brown, Member for Capalaba, Michael Hart, Member for Burleigh, Robbie Cadden, Member for Traeger, Tom Smith, Member for Bundaberg. This briefing is a proceeding of the Queensland Parliament and is subject to the Parliament's standing rules and orders. Only the committee and invited witnesses may participate in the proceedings. Witnesses are not required to give evidence under oath or affirmation, but I remind witnesses that intentionally misleading the committee is a serious offence. I also remind members of the public that they may be excluded from the briefing at the discretion of the committee. These proceedings are being recorded and broadcast live on the Parliament's website. Media may be present and are subject to the committee's media rules and the chair's direction at all times. You may be filmed or photographed during the proceedings, and images may also appear on the Parliament's website or social media pages. If you would please turn your mobile phones off onto silent mode, as well as the computers. I now welcome, we've got Steve Andrew MP, Member for Morenni, and Patricia Monteith. Hello Patricia, how are you there? Parliamentary Policy Officer. Good morning. I invite you to brief the committee, after which committee members may have some questions for you. Member for Morenni.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for Trish coming in today to support me with this, and also the committee. I'd like to thank the members of the Housing, Big Build and Manufacturing Committee for this opportunity to appear before you this morning, and I will try to give a broad overview of the reason for the bill, as well as its main objectives and how they will be achieved. Today, public-private partnerships, or PPP arrangements, are being used to deliver everything from roads, tunnels, railways, energy and water, to schools, aged care, hospitals and prisons. There is therefore a real need to establish transparent disclosure standards for all public-private operations that provide infrastructure or public services in Queensland. Accordingly, the bill seeks to establish a general principle in favour of full transparency and accountability around the state's PPP arrangements, restore public trust, mitigate against the risk of corruption, and increase public knowledge on how taxpayers' money is being spent and what contractual commitments the government is taking on, which may bind the state for decades to come. The bill also responds to various findings and recommendations contained in the reports of the Queensland Audit Office, QAO, over the past decade or more. Many of these reports make reference to the lack of disclosure and reporting on the delivery of PPP projects and programs in Queensland. On the 14th of December 2023, the Queensland Audit Office report on major projects 2023 highlighted how clear and complete reporting on capital projects is critical for building public trust and ensuring accountability. This particularly applies to the disclosure requirements for the annual capital statement and public-private partnerships. In another report on contract management, the Auditor General reflects that the public has the right to know how much public money government is spending on what and with which vendors. The underlying principle of the bill is therefore that the information should be made public unless there is a justifiable commercial reason for it not to be. The bill's measures to increase the transparency and accountability of PPPs will be introduced in a proportionate way so as not to unnecessarily increase the burden of administration and costs of PPP projects. These measures include embedding the principle of value for money in the procurement process and ensuring that commercial activities carried out by PPPs are conducted in accordance with the principles of transparency, fairness, proper management, integrity, accountability and long-term sustainability. Over the next few years, the Queensland Government has said it plans to invest in transport infrastructure, including additional train rolling stock, Gold Coast Light Rail, M1 highway upgrades and the Cross River Rail, construction of new schools, critical infrastructure upgrades and construction including the Woodford Youth Detention Centre, hospitals and social housing, and venue infrastructure for Brisbane's 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. According to the last year's budget, strategy and outlook, These projects will mainly be delivered through public-private partnerships, or PPP. Given the large size of these PPP transactions and the long financial commitment by the taxpayer, more transparency is needed to ensure this massive program of infrastructure is delivered in as transparent and a cost-efficient manner as possible. With the interest rates rising, the higher cost of private finance compared to the government borrowing will increasingly make PPP arrangements significantly more expensive option for the delivery of government services and infrastructure. According to Clause 13 of the bill, it sets out general obligations for public sector entities before undertaking a major project as a PPP. These include a requirement to analyse the viability and expected risks, costs and benefits of the proposed PPP, including an assessment of the business case for the project and an evaluation of the qualifications, experience and financial capacity the private sector entity that will be carrying out the project to confirm whether the entity has the actual ability to deliver the project on time and within the budget. The bill also requires government entities to carry out a value for money, or VMF, assessment and to publish the VMF on a government website along with details of data and methodology used to make the assessment and its results. When assessing whether the project is likely to achieve value for money, the public sector entity must also consider for each step in the project the priority of the step, alternative ways of achieving the step, and the cost and benefits of alternative approaches. The public sector entity must also prepare an appropriate public sector comparator for the project measured against a public sector option. Without the proper checks and balances being legislated around its commercial arrangements, the government cannot be properly held to account for its spending decisions. In the case of large-scale infrastructure, it is critical that financing arrangements not be secretive, that communities have a say, and that the implementation proceeds with independent oversight. Finally, the second key objective of the bill is to allow the Auditor-General to inspect and examine the PPP reports of the public sector entities in Queensland. Clause 16 of the bill outlines the reporting duties of public sector entities to the Auditor-General, including the preparation of a report on the progress of results of the project at least once every 4 years. Clause 17 requires the Auditor-General to conduct a review into all relevant matters relating to the major project as soon as practical after receiving this report. The Auditor-General must then give the review report to the Minister, who will then table it in Parliament within 10 business days. And I thank you all today for allowing me to speak and my policy officer to attend. I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Member from Moroney. I'll start off with a couple from me. My first exposure to PPPs was there's a school that used to be in my electorate there that was, when I came in, that school had just commenced, and certainly the terms that were revealed to me were a bit of an education for an incoming MP. So that was my first exposure to it there. Are there any projects that you've seen or that you have have concerned you about PPPs that have got your attention?
Well, there are, and this is a situation like the Cross River Rail, some of the blowouts that we see in government all the time. So I'm trying to give a broad overview. We were very concerned about the Olympic Games and how that can blow out over time. That was one thing that really took my attention. I thought that, we can't really get a full gauge of that. Even with the Pioneer Burdekin Hydro, we can't get a bit of information on that too. So I just wanted to make an overview that really showed transparency on all the projects going forward, given the fact our debt level and what's actually happening as far as our interest rates and what we're actually achieving and how we're achieving it and the costs of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Certainly there's those capital projects that are going across, and there's different models how there's funding, but this one is you're focusing on those public-private partnerships. Is there anything in particular that those kind of projects where the risk and the reward is shared amongst the government and private sector? Is there anything particular that...
Oh, the hospitals, for starters, are one of them.
Oh, in terms, I meant the principles.
Yeah.
Is it just those? Is it projects generally, or is it just PPPs?
Well, mainly with PPPs to start with. Now, if this opens up a situation where that can be superimposed on other projects, well, that's great. Then we'll actually be able to see everything is the way it should be, and our financial commitment is to that as well. So, that's the way I think just the introduction of it, trying to get that through from the Auditor General, what we're trying to do is give a baseline to where we are with this. It's a new and novel idea to be able to. In other states, it's not. We're finding in other states, actually, they're finding out that projects are running like in New South Wales just recently, and my policy officer will probably attest to this too. They've actually came up with some situations where they've seen that the actual project's blown out by 3 times what it should have cost, that probably the government could have delivered. So these are the things we're trying to identify, how it works. So it's able for us, not just for the opposition or anyone on the outside, but also for the government to understand where we are as well. As you know, I asked the questions just recently in estimates. We haven't conducted many audits, Chair, on anything really, not even our budget or any of our workings with the PPP. So this was sort of born out of that. So we're in new territory and we're trying to do our best to implement something that's got that transparency for the government and also for the taxpayer.
Some of the biggest ones we've got recently, Cross River Rail and the Gold Coast Light Rail 3, I think that was. You've mentioned Olympic projects and renewable projects. Is there any reason why you're concerned about those particular projects?
We can't see the arrangements. So it'd be nice to understand what they actually mean for us as the taxpayers. That it's all sort of hidden in this commercial and confidence arrangement. So we want to try and open that up to be able to see what we're actually getting for our money, what it's going to cost us over time, what those contracts mean as far as, do they have stuff for rehabilitation put in there? Is there stuff that will, work with those Aboriginal corporations that own that land? Who's responsible for the liability? There's stuff in there that I'd like to see that people can understand what these really mean for Queensland.
I'll just go over to I've got a few more questions, but I'll go to the Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Member Moreno. Tricia, thanks very much. In terms of that commercial and confidence arrangements, where do you see your bill intersecting with that, and how do you differentiate between, commercial and confidence as it currently stands and under your bill?
Well, what we're trying to do, we don't want to see the companies' what they do as far as their really what their key stuff is. We just want to see an overview of the spend, where the spend is. We don't want to reveal, some companies obviously have their own IP and all that. We're not after any of that. It's sort of at the moment, we always talk about commercial and confidence, and it's to say that it makes a fair playing field or doesn't expose the actual business themselves or what they do and how they do it. We don't want to know that. We just want to know the cost arrangements, the transparency around it, the contractual arrangements directly with the government, and the reports on that, and see we're actually running as far as that whole consideration is concerned. Yeah.
Sure. So we actually, on this committee, looked at some of the Auditor General's reports around infrastructure and some of the cost increases in those areas. So the Auditor General does have a look at some of those things, but how will your bill differentiate what's business now and what happens after your bill's in?
I'll throw that over to my policy officer. She'll give you a more in-depth look at that.
Yeah, okay. Could you just repeat the question again? Sorry.
Sure. No, in terms of the Auditor General, my understanding with your bill, it will be any PPP the Auditor General can have a look at.
Yeah.
How does that change what currently happens now? Because they do look at some of the things.
Some of the other states have done, their Auditor Generals have done specific performance audits on PPP arrangements in the state. So that's New South Wales, Victoria, and I think WA. Queensland's one of only, I think Tasmania's done it too. Yeah, so Queensland has never done a PPP performance audit ever. And Steve at the estimates double-checked that with the acting Auditor General.
That's right.
Asked, because the study that we looked at was from 2017, because there's not much out there that's been written on it, as distinct from an infrastructure program. And it said that Queensland had never done a performance audit on any of its PPPs. And then Steve asked the Auditor General, and she confirmed that it had never been done. So it's a different sort of. thing to what the Auditor General does now, where he does make passing comments to PPPs, like Steve quoted in his opening remarks, and he does often say, and this is, or it goes back to, I think there was one done in 2011 where they talked about PPPs and how there was no transparency around the arrangements. And just in terms of what you were asking, Steve, before about the commercial in confidence, I think Steve's position is that, if you're listed on the stock exchange, a company has to give certain information, and they're able to do that without jeopardising their IP or trade secrets. So we don't see why the PPP consortiums can't be a little bit more transparent, particularly since these are really complex, large projects that, and agreements that go for decades. And they're pretty inflexible too, so it'd be nice to know the terms of those agreements.
Sorry, not used to this yet. Thanks for coming in, Steve.
Thanks,
in the explanatory notes, there isn't any sort of indication about the consultation that you've done with other parties and all that, and you've referred a couple of times to we. Have you been consulting with someone about the formation of this bill?
Oh, look, I've spoken to a few different people, and I've also spoken just directly and indirectly with the Audit Office as well. So what we wanted to do was just basically, get some information from whoever we could put this bill together. So we did not go to any parties as far as the major parties were concerned. I did speak with some other people, around politics and other businesses about the situation and how it would affect, not just them. And they actually tender for stuff all the time, whether it's state or whether it's local government. And they did tell us, look, it would be good to see some of this information, put out there for the public to understand. That's generally what I did. And I've been studying a lot of stuff to do with, the delivery of the Mount Morgan pipeline, some of the other projects in my region. And it just rings out to me. We ask questions even with some of the renewable sector. And it seems that you just can't get any information from anyone. So that's part of the actual ask, the reasoning behind what I've done.
Yeah, so the journey started for you off the Mount Morgan, and then you've consulted with some businesses.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's mainly to do with that side of it. I have spoken to a lot of large lawyers and that down in this area as well in Brisbane, just generally about the situation. They don't talk about their clients per se, but just a generalisation around what actually happens with those partnerships. And a lot of people raise questions like, so how does that work? And you can't answer because we don't know. Yeah. So we just wanted to sort of see what that situation was, and because the other states have actually looked at that, and it was very surprising to me when I asked that question in estimates that we hadn't done a performance audit or hadn't actually done one at all. There is definitely a need for it. We are a unicameral parliament. We don't have the oversight of the Senate here, the upper house. So, these are checks and balances that we thought would be beneficial for not just us and how we work as government and non-government members, but for the taxpayer as well to see, because every time we go to the papers is a blowout. Like Cross River Rail blown out by almost $1 billion. Other examples of PPPs, the light rail stage 3, which originally budgeted for $709 million and has since reached a target budget of $1,219 million. The Coomera Connector was originally costed at $1.53 billion, but has since been revised of upwards to $2.162 billion. There's all this stuff that keeps coming up, but we can't seem to be able to find out how it works, why it works, and it does. It does bind the state. It does bind our public money for a long time, and it also, the projects are held up, so we're just trying to work around that situation.
And so did these lawyers and companies talk about the other jurisdictions and how it works?
Yeah, well, that's what we were just talking earlier about the situation where, and Trish, you might be able to expand on that, the stuff in New South Wales.
Well, I think it's in the explanatory notes that there isn't any specific legislation to do with, governing PPPs and how they operate anywhere in Australia. And down in New South Wales, well, that was, Alan Fells did a review just recently. I'm not sure if you saw it on the news, but the Transurban owns, I think, 11 tollways down there, and one in particular, West Connects, is because with the cost of living and everything, the tolls have all gone up, and so anyway, they're talking about having to somehow pay Transurban out because, and to take it back over by the government because people are, up in arms, and this review was quite damning. So I think there is a real lack of legislation. There are guidelines, but they're not mandatory the way legislation would be. And for example, this is from the Auditor General's report on major projects, where in Queensland, there's no requirement to disclose in relation to PPPs. The project advisors, risk allocations, contract termination rights, contract modification procedures, value for money analysis, service payments, contributions by parties, including private financing. So, and if you have a look, Queensland's much worse than the other states. The other states do require those things to be disclosed. So, so that would be, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Steve, how did you come up with the $10 million threshold figure? And do you know how many PPPs there would be that
It was just a figure that that we came up with, that we worked with OQPC, we worked with the actual people around that figure being at the minimum threshold. So yeah, it just gives us a bit more clarity going right back even to the smaller actual jobs and smaller contracts. So it's just gives us a bit more fidelity, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. I've got light rail stage 3 in my patch, a PPP, and I don't really know how it works or what's involved because it isn't transparent and accountable. So while I think this is a good idea, I do have some concerns, though, over the information that may become available to the PPP entity's competitor if you put out exactly how everything works.
We weren't looking for that, Mr. Hart. We weren't looking for that.
Yeah.
So you're more interested in general information?
Yeah.
With say, for instance, light rail stage 3, we don't know. I think we do know how long the availability charge goes on for, but not how much it is, how much is being paid, that sort of information. So what level of information would you see being made available to the public, or would it be restricted more to the Auditor General?
Well, this is...
The Auditor Generals have actually said that a lot of these private entity parties, they're large consortiums where they have an effective monopoly. So there aren't really, competition doesn't usually really factor into it because it is an effective monopoly. So we think that there's a lot more room for disclosure, in particular around the terms of the agreement. Like you have the air train, for example, which charges an exorbitant amount, and so nobody rides on the air train. But the government doesn't seem to have any way to get them to change that. So we're kind of stuck. And, they've been trying to persuade, I think it's a UK pension fund that owns it, and they won't, but yeah, so.
So how does what you're proposing here change that outcome?
Well,
Well, disclosure, because we would have.
you won't be making the same mistakes again. If we know where we're failing, if we know what's going on, we can at least go back and review the process of where we started from in the beginning. And this is the whole thing. What have we learned from it? We can't learn anything if we don't audit it. And this is why all of us get audited.
Okay, good point. Good point.
And that's the thing going forward. For me, it's like, how do we actually measure where we are and where we stand if we've never measured it? So it won't just go across just that one example. It'll go across mostly all of the examples of our interaction as government with large contractual agreements going forward. So what we learn from that is what we can actually adjust or review, and then hopefully make it a better process, not just for us, cheaper for us. Instead of us measuring on success on what we spend, it'd be good to measure our success on what we save, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll extend this by a few minutes there. I want to make sure the member for Traeger has a good go. Member for Bundaberg.
Thank you, Chair. Member for Morani, thank you for being here. Could I just ask, you've done 2 terms here. Is this your first private member's bill, or did you?
Oh, we did a private members bill on the for the Australian South Sea Islanders, but it was rejected on the governor's note because it did have a portion of a committee that was so the government we weren't allowed to put that forward.
Okay, and that was in this term.
That was in the last term. This
okay.
term is the first private. Sorry, this term. Yeah, I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry, time goes away from me.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, so we have that, and also this is the second one. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. So on your private members bill, you've actually submitted double what the LNP have in this current term. Is that correct?
I won't go into politics,
Okay.
but look, if that's an observation you've made, the political side of it, we're just trying to work for the people of Queensland. I'm sure we all are, So.
Thank you, Member for Morani, very hard-working member. Ms Monteith, could I ask a question? So, Parliamentary Policy Officer, you're employed by the Parliament, is that correct? Okay. And Member for Morani, if I can just go back to what the Member for Capalaba was saying. You keep saying this we. When you're saying we, are you referring to yourself and Ms Monteith, or are you saying yourself and others?
It's just a generalisation. Yeah.
Just a generalisation of a we. Okay. But this is very much your bill, your intention, and the ideas and policies
We've worked a lot on this together. Yes.
Okay, throughout, and that's how you've come to this final decision. Wonderful, thank you. Could I maybe just ask? You've got here in Part 2, Section 11 or Clause 11, assessment of major project for PPP, and it's point 4, so number 4. It says, if the public sector entity decides to undertake the major project as a PPP, the procurement of goods and services and construction carried out as part of the project must be in accordance with this Act. I'm just wondering, because there's only 3 mentions of procurement in this Act. Are you suggesting that this Act outlines the procurement of goods and services and how it must be? Could you just explain that a little bit clearer?
But to give that really clarity, I'll take it on notice so we can come back to you exactly on what you need for that. That'll be the better way for us to do that.
Okay, that'd be a good thing. And just a final one before I do move back to the chair, because I know the member for Traeger will have questions. You highlighted some projects before that, and to use your term, you said had blown out rather than being re-costed. Is it your intention then that if projects do become more expensive because of increased cost of materials, that those projects be cut and no longer go ahead?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. It's about the way that we deliver the projects, what we can do. No one can oversee the costs of blowouts of actual raw materials. That's on the world stage. That happens the way it is. It's basically generally trying to make sure that what the actual content of whatever the project is, how we deliver it, what we're delivering it, is in accordance to what we believe is the best outcome for the government and also the taxpayers. Some of those blowouts you can't control, obviously, but we do the best to try and do what we do. So does that mean that we buy you know, when we actually engage the project, do we pre-buy all the materials to stop those blowouts? Does that mean that we have to make sure that we have all that situation cared for as part of the preamble, the pre-arrangement of the contract, so that you don't see that blowout? So that gets all prepaid for, so you don't actually have that. These are the sort of things that need to be incorporated into these Triple P arrangements that will see a definite change in the way that these things blow out. That's part of the morphing of what the bill will be. We have to get the bill in place first to see where that'll end up and where that'll finish up.
Very quickly, Member for Moroney, has industry engaged with you about concerns of engaging with the government if there was to be other side of the Queensland Audit Office?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, Member for Traeger.
There we go. As I understand it, we're made aware that there was a change on the website of policy after the introduction of the bill. Can you enlighten us?
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, you were just having a look. There's been an update, or not an update, but an introduction after the bill. Sorry?
Yeah, so in our bill, we refer to the 2015 PPP guidelines, which sort of govern PPP arrangements in Queensland. And I just was looking last night and I saw that probably a day or two after Steve tabled our bill, they've actually updated the guidelines quite comprehensively. Yeah, that one there. Queensland Public-Private Partnership Supporting Guidelines. Yeah, so it does contain a lot of the things that we have in the bill, but I think, you know, the idea was to have something in legislation. Yeah.
So did you want to table that document there?
If we could, please, yes. Member for Traeger. So that's good. It's at least, you know, that they're obviously, you know, it's started something that maybe could morph into something that, you know, is very practicable and tangible for us to use as both government, crossbench and opposition.
Point of order, Chair. Is the member suggesting that his introduction of a private member's bill has sent the department to rigorously?
No, I never suggested anything. Just made a
It's an insinuation that I thought was unfounded at this point.
Sorry, through the Chair, it was me insinuating it by the question, and I think it's a pretty pertinent observation to make that after 2015 it gets changed after the introduction of the bill. Whether it is or not, it's just an observation.
From myself, Member from Randy. So, once again, you've said about the people you've consulted with. You've talked about some of the companies. Were there companies that work in, for example, in delivering renewables or in delivering a resource or the resource companies?
I've talked to a lot of people from all sorts of walks of life about it, and mainly to a lot of people in my electorate are very sort of. We started off. Say, for instance, with the pipeline at Mount Morgan, we started off with 44 million, then it went to 80-something million, and there's a lot of questions around those. So some of the big providers, like SMW and all the rest of it, in Rockhampton, come to me and ask me, what's going on? You know, like, how does this all work? So we're trying to find out from those sort of things that have driven me from my electorate to work out a way of doing it. And like I said, we've come forward by asking in Parliament about these audits. So it was just another thing that we thought that, you know, would add value to Queensland Parliament if we took on some of the same initiatives as other jurisdictions have with the way that they audit. So that's pretty much it, Chair.
Yeah, so SMW, for example, is a
contracting company
based in your area? Or?
No, but still, they're just there. But they did, yeah.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right there. And the law firms as well? You said
they weren't firms as such. They were just basically people that I've spoken to across the way. You know, lawyers that I know and different people that I walk into or run into, acquaintances. Yeah.
I think certainly in the future that probably aids us in the consideration of the bill if we've got that transparent disclosure of who you've been talking
Yeah.
to, who've been getting
Okay.
advice
I'll
from.
take that into full
That's
consideration.
something that would help us out with that consideration.
I did have some conversations with a lawyer at Price Waterhouse Coopers.
Okay. Yep. We appreciate that. Okay. Do we? Just last one from me. You've talked about the guidelines from the Information Commissioner about commercial in confidence. Are they new requirements or are they existing requirements that the Information Commissioner can deliver? I think those guidelines, delivering those guidelines on commercial in confidence requirements. I wasn't quite sure if that's something new that's being proposed or a better application of what's already.
Better application, I'd say more so, Chair. Yeah.
Okay. Any other further questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That concludes this briefing. Did we have one question on notice?
Yes.
That was on the more information on reference to procurement of goods and services. We will email you the direct question on that there, and that we'll need that by 5 p.m. next Monday. That concludes the briefing. Thank you to everyone who's participated today. Thank you to our Hansard reporters. A transcript of these proceedings will be on the committee's webpage in due course, and thank you to our secretariat as well. I declare this public briefing closed.